Hi everyone, my name is Kate Jones, and today I will be presenting to you Bridging the Gap, Finding Common Ground and Taking an Intersectional Approach in Asexuality and Disability Activism, where I will be talking about divides between asexuality and disability and how we can go about fixing them in order to create more inclusive communities. Before I get started, I'd like to say that if you would like them, there are closed captions available on this video as well as a script, the link for which is in the description for this video. To start, I'm going to briefly introduce my topic. Asexuality and disability are both marginalized communities. People who identify as disabled and/or asexual face medicalization and delegitimization from much of society. However, while this shared experience of oppression may lead one to believe that these two communities stand in solidarity, they are actually often divided. Not only can this be harmful, and asexuality and disability rights activists fight to have their voices heard and make societal change, but can also be extremely damaging to those who fall into both identity groups. In this project, my goal is to answer the question of why there is a gap between the disability and asexuality communities, especially between those involved in activism, and how we can begin to go about bridging that gap. In order to answer this question, I gathered and analyzed information from existing research in disability and asexuality. I looked at studies examining the lived experiences of those who identify as asexual, disabled, or both. I also looked at current approaches to disability and asexuality activism and what the cause or causes of the rift between them is. I was particularly interested in finding overlaps between experiences and activism, as well as the unique challenges presented to those who live in the intersection between asexual and disabled identities. All of this information can be used to give a sense of where to start when bringing these two often very divided communities together. I'll begin discussing my findings by talking about the similarities between the asexuality and disability communities. One huge similarity between the asexuality and disability communities is that both have a history of being medicalized and are pushing against it with a socio-political model of understanding. Asexuality has been wrongly medicalized and grouped with hyposexual desire disorder, which can be hugely invalidating as people who identify as asexual choose to identify that way and don't feel distressed because they experience little to no sexual attraction, which is a primary criteria for hyposexual desire disorder. Meanwhile, the medical model of disability, which states that the cause of disability is the impairment itself and the solution is purely medical treatment to fix that impairment, is still incredibly prominent in society and in healthcare in particular. This has resulted in the medicalization of disability and disabling aspects of societal structures being largely ignored, which is very problematic for disabled people as it allows inaccessibility to continue to exist. Activists for both asexuality and disability rights have pointed out the importance of using a socio-political model to highlight how asexuality and disability aren't medical problems that need to be solved, but valid identities that need to be better accepted by society. Members of both communities also have struggled with delegitimization and the concept of passing. Many are quick to tell asexual people that they just haven't met the right person yet, or that they should consider talking to a doctor, to tell people with chronic illnesses that their struggle is all in their head. It can be a constant fight for both asexual and disabled people to validate their identity as they are being told that they're making up that identity. At the same time, they can also be told that they don't look the stereotypical part of an asexual or a disabled person, and thus have to validate their identity because they can pass as normal. There are two main ideas that have caused the separation of the asexuality and disability communities. The first of these is the myth of asexuality, which is the societal belief that all disabled people are asexual. For those with a physical disability, this tends to be based on the idea that they don't or can't feel sexual attraction due to their physical impairment. In contrast, for those with cognitive or mental disabilities, there tends to be a belief that they are unable to consent to a sexual relationship and thus must be asexual. Disability activists push against this untrue and damaging belief. However, in the process, they can invalidate disabled people who do identify as asexual and even bring into question the validity of the asexual identity as a whole. The second is the idea of the gold star asexual, which defines an asexual person who is supposedly the perfect model of asexuality. With regards to disability, this means that they are not disabled, as having a disability leads to potential medicalization and saying that one's disability or impairment is the cause of one's asexuality, and are completely against asexuality being medicalized. In other words, this person can't and won't reinforce the medicalization of asexuality. Once again, this is incredibly invalidating to disabled people who identify as asexual and just further pushes the two communities away from each other. As I briefly mentioned before, this gap between the asexuality and disability communities and the causes for it can be incredibly damaging for those who fall in the intersection, i.e., disabled asexual people. Disabled asexual people also have different and unique experiences simply because of the intersection of their identities and societal notions about their identities. Firstly, disabled asexual people can find it challenging to fit in and feel totally accepted by either community because of the complete division between them. They may feel as though they have to change a part of themselves in order to be accepted and can't just be accepted as they are. Secondly, disabled asexual people often feel as though they can't acknowledge their disability or at all link it to their identity as asexual if they want to be a part of the asexual community. Some common worries include having to justify their identity as asexual, making asexuality look bad, and unintentionally reinforcing stereotypes about asexuality. For example, an asexual disabled person may fear attending a pride parade as openly asexual, as it could result in a person or people seeing them and then taking it as proof that asexuality arises from disability or a medical condition, or that all disabled people are asexual. In that case, exclusion from the disability community in addition to the asexuality community could be a result. Furthermore, disabled asexual people can still be invalidated by a society that believes in the myth of asexuality because they are actively choosing to identify as asexual. By not simply having the label forced on them per the myth of asexuality, they are pushing against ableist stereotypes and thus face an additional form of delegitimization. It also may take disabled asexual people longer to realize that they are asexual and come to know that part of themselves and their identity. They may assume that their lack of interest in sexual activity or not having sexual attraction is because of their disability, as that is what society teaches. This experience can complicate their identity as asexual and prevent them from having a positive association with it for a period of time. From these findings, I was able to draw the following conclusions. The two primary causes of the gap between the disability and asexuality communities are the push against the myth of asexuality and the idea of the gold star asexual. These are both largely the results of and perpetuated by societal bigotry. The myth of asexuality is a stereotype that the disability community has to combat, while the gold star asexual arises from the medicalization of asexuality and the need to push against it. Without societal oppression, it can be argued that this divide between the communities wouldn't exist. Recognizing that oppression shouldn't lead to further oppression and that this divide has no real need to exist is the first step in bridging the gap. It needs to be realized that this gap is societally created and is causing nothing but harm. The next step to bridging the gap is to initiate open communication between the two groups to acknowledge their common ground. The third, and arguably most important step of beginning to bridge the gap is to incorporate an intersectional approach into the activism used by both communities. One major way this can be done is by recognizing the unique experiences of disabled asexual people and amplifying their voices and stories. It needs to be addressed that the experiences of the allosexual disabled person or the able bodied asexual person do not represent the experiences of the entire community. This lessens the erasure and oppression of disabled asexual people while also creating greater connection between the asexual and disability communities. It should also be noted that this method of intersectional approach works and is important for the intersections of other minority groups with asexuality and disability, such as BIPOC identities and women or genderqueer identities. Overall, All of these steps taken to bridge the gap between the asexuality and disability communities will help them to have more successful, inclusive activism and be more likely to create societal change that benefits them both. That concludes my presentation. Here are my references. Thank you for joining me for this presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it.